412. We are part of the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. I am Tyler, and with me as always is my co-host Smitty. We have a lot to talk about this week. A lot of busy things happening in the Pittsburgh sports, and I'm not sure where to start. Actually,
oh my! I did. I knew that in some way it was going to be thrown in to the intro.
Yeah, I think that pretty much tells you where we're going to start. Same home for the Pittsburgh Steelers. New name though, Acrisure, insurance company from Detroit, has bought the naming rights for the, I guess, old Heinz Field. That feels weird, very weird to say. It was a
oh, don't worry, it's lucky to
deal, $150 million. So it blows the old deal with Heinz out of the water. But yeah, that's the new thing with the Pittsburgh Steelers. It has nothing to do with the team. It's all about the stadium and the naming rights.
Yeah, I guess I didn't realize how much of a steal Heinz was getting on that deal, that they had $57 million in total for 20 years of naming rights. Just seems super low. But now, I mean, as a season ticket holder, I'm expecting big things here in terms of stadium renovations now with the money that they're going to be bringing in from this new deal, because I love the environment of watching games there. I think there's a lot of improvements that can be made in terms of the stadium itself. Just when you talk about, just the concourses, concessions, I mean, the seating itself, I'm curious to see where they go with this, but hopefully that things like that are already kind of being mapped out with them getting this new deal.
Yeah, I don't want to be like stoned in Market Square or anything for saying something like this, but Heinz Field was not exactly a nice stadium nowadays. I don't want to hurt a lot of people's feelings by saying that, but I feel like if you've been to a different NFL stadium, at least a newer one, you quickly realize that it's a lot more renovated than Heinz Field was. At least we weren't pissing in troughs anymore. But
exactly. I was about to say that.
Yeah, we didn't go to the bathroom in a trough anymore, but they got away from that. But there's a lot that they could do to that stadium to really make it more up to date. And I'm sure Acrisure is going to work on that. But it's such a weird thing. We really, I mean, you and I always talk about like how, especially for you, like how you said, like Ben has been your quarterback your whole life of Steeler fandom. Well, Heinz Field for basically our whole life of Steeler fandoms, because Heinz Field has been a thing since we were like 5 or 6 years old. Our entire lives, that's what we've known. And so this is just like a completely different it just feels wrong to me. For people our age specifically, maybe if you're older and you went through like the Three Rivers to Heinz Field thing, it's not as big of a deal to you. But I feel like anybody born in the 90s that kind of just grew up with Heinz Field being your like stadium name, it's kind of a big deal. And Acrisure, I don't really have an issue like with the company it's like self buying the naming rights. I think my only like gripe with it is that it just doesn't flow off the tongue the same.
3 syllables,
as Heinz Field. Acrisure Stadium. Honestly, Acrisure, if you look at it phonetically, it's kind of like sounds like a sneeze in a way. Like Acrisure. That's what I think about. And so I don't really like it for that. But besides that, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a stadium name. It is what it is. I'm sure they'll do great things for the team, the stadium, and everything like that. But the nostalgia factor definitely is not going to be there. And I know Heinz hasn't been a Pittsburgh-based company ever since they got bought by Kraft like 7 years ago. But still, that was just like a very sentimental thing that got taken away from us, I feel like. And it's going to be even more of a new era than we've talked about. I mean, we lose Ben, we lose Colbert, we're losing Heinz. I mean, I don't know what else there is to say. There's a lot of change coming with just one team in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, in just one off season. I mean, I guess hopefully like Rocky Blyer threw out there, like maybe they could have like Rooney Field at Acrisure Stadium or something like that, to kind of so they can call it something else. People are still going to be calling it Heinz Field though. Like that's the thing. We've already seen it on Twitter. I don't think that you could say like, oh, it's just like people, it's going to last like 24, 48 hours and be a short-term thing. Well, I really don't think so. I think that people are just going to be calling it that. And it's not even I don't know that it's a spite thing. Again, I just think that people are just like, again, so used to it. It's been the only name that they've known for this field, for the team that they love.
I will relate it to something that we know as Steeler fans. Whenever Heath Miller retired, if a big white tight end caught the ball, I mean, what did they say? It was still Heath. Like, it didn't
Yeah.
matter who was catching the ball. Now it's changed because Muth works the same way that people use Heath, so at least they're not doing that with them. But between Pat Freiermuth and Heath Miller, every white tight end that caught the ball was going to be getting Heath yelled after he caught the ball. It's just something like that. It's ingrained in our heads that's Heinz Field. And so I don't think it's out of spite. I just think it's a natural, just like off the tongue, like that's Heinz Field when I look at it.
Yeah, I think the thing with that didn't help with the tight ends either was we couldn't find one for the longest time between Heath and Pat Freiermuth. So, also, I think that like you can go back to last year when we knew that like this was going to be the last year that Heinz Field was called that unless they re-upped the rights, and it was kind of like we really didn't know if that was going to be the case. This did kind of seem like out of nowhere within 24, 48 hours. Bam, it has a new name. I think you and I were on the same page thinking it was just going to be like one of the big hospitals in Pittsburgh or something like stepping in like a UPMC field or something like that. So UPMC, I'm not surprised that it's no longer. Network, I'm not surprised.
There's already a Highmark Stadium, but let's be honest. Highmark Stadium across the river, if the Steelers wanted that stadium to be Highmark Stadium, the little stadium, like the Riverhounds, I'm sorry, you're getting a new stadium name. But yeah, honestly, my personal favorite, if it was going to be a Pittsburgh-based company, was probably U.S. Steel, because I just think it fit the brand.
I don't know if the money would have been there, but right.
No, yeah, it might not have been realistic, but it fit the brand of the team, the city, and just everything about it. It would have been perfect, but again, like. We're not the ones dishing out the millions of dollars for stuff like this, so we don't really have a say.
The last thing I want to add is like, man, it was hilarious. I'm not like trying to bash people or anything right now. I legitimately thought it was funny that people were just thinking like the Steelers were just picking whichever one was their favorite, and like money wasn't a factor here. Like, yeah, Primanti Brothers Field or Giant Eagle Stadium or something like that. Turner's Tea, just like a Pittsburgh brand because they liked the name of it and thought it would say, yeah. Exactly. And it's just like, like the Steelers were just like, yeah, we like the name of this one. It sticks to Pittsburgh.
Around the 412 field.
That would have actually been good.
Around the 412 field at DK Pittsburgh Sports Stadium. Yeah.
There you go.
Something like that.
I think that we've landed on it. Okay, 20 years from now when this deal expires.
15. We don't have to wait as long.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Sorry, the Heinz deal was 20. This is 15. Yeah, so we're going to be...
you and I are going to be like 42 whenever this deal expires.
Yeah, I tweeted it yesterday. That's crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, let us know in the comments. Well, actually, you don't have to because we've seen it on Twitter. I would say let us know in the comments how you guys are feeling about this deal. We know how you're feeling about this deal and what you think about the stadium. You're not going to be calling it that. But if you have anything maybe that's like different from what we've seen, an opinion on it, go ahead and throw it out there. It's pretty much been the same regurgitated opinion. You really can't get too many different opinions on this thing. But if you have any other different thoughts, please be sure to leave them in the comments, tweet them at us, whatever. We will take a quick break. When we come back, a lot of stuff to talk about when it comes to the Pittsburgh Penguins before free agency kicks off by the time you're listening or watching to this today. So we'll talk about that when we come back. But this is Around the 412 on the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. Welcome back to Around the 412 on the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. I'm Smitty. That is Tyler. It happened. In full transparency, we're just going to get this out in the open. We've tweeted about it, so we can tell you guys as we're recording this, we had recorded the full show already. Like, we were ready to roll. We got laptops. We were ready for tomorrow's show to come out. And Gino signs an extension with the Pens, and half of our Pens talk would have been obsolete on the show if we were to do that. We can't do that to you guys for another straight week where it's just, what's the point of even putting this content out because it doesn't matter. So we're here to talk about it. The Pens give Evgeni Malkin an extension at 4 years, $24.4 million. This deal, according to Mike DeFabo, has been on the table for over a week. So this is the deal that Gino had. So obviously something there happened. I think that maybe Crosby got in his ear and said, take this deal. we gotta keep this thing moving. And obviously, we're thrilled about it. This is like raw emotion. We haven't had much time to process this. We're literally just jumping on here and recording. So the rest of this, when we talk about the other contracts, we have had time to think about. But with Gino, it literally just happened. We're obviously thrilled.
Yeah. First off, hold on. Steph Curry goes back. I'm Mike Breen. Bang! Sorry, that might have been a little loud for most of you.
Dude, if you're wearing earphones right now,
no,
God bless you.
We literally had to re-record this whole segment because 10 minutes after we stopped recording, Gino signs. And of course, in around the 412 fashion, this always happens. Although normally it's like the day or two after, but this is like
Letang last week.
10 minutes, 15 minutes after. So yeah, I'm stoked about this. And we kind of, we talked about in our segment that none of you are going to hear how this is like, how did it get to this point and everything, and like what contract do we believe and everything. But now we know what contracts were real and what contracts weren't. At least on the surface, it seems like that. And the 4x6.1 was actually true. I mean, it's cap friendly. Already has it updated on their site and everything. And I think that's a great number. Whenever we talked to Jesse, he said if you could get it around $6 million, that'd be great. I said I like 6.5 would be good for me too. So 4x6.1, and to me, this just means that Sid's contract is not going to be up whenever it's up in 3 more years. Because I mean, Letang will have 3 more years after that, and then Gino will have at least another year. So, yeah, this is great. Now all of our worries about second line center are gone. I'm kind of filled of adrenaline right now because I was kind of worried whenever we got off, like what's going to happen, what were we talking about is in terms of like second line center, how's it going to work out? Is he going to be signed by 12 o'clock? What's going to work out if he's not? Like how quickly will it happen? And all the free agent centers, like what's going to happen? Now it's calm, cool, collected. We don't have to worry about that. Honestly, now it's tomorrow is
do they trade a defenseman?
Less stressful. Yeah. They can trade.
A defenseman. How do they fill out the roster? Because little less than $4 million now to work with following this Gino extension, and I mean, for the sake of needing cap space or not, I think the defenseman was going to be moved to open up the spot for POJ. But once they make that move, you're talking about in the ballpark of like $7 million, $8 million to work with.
So right now they have 4.2.
4.2.
4.2.
Okay.
You add on the 825 of POJ. They'll have around $8 million to work with. So, okay. I listen. We're just spitballing now. This is happy hour.
But
right
they
now,
do probably want to go into the season with like 3 to 5-ish. I would think. I don't know.
Maybe. What do the Penguins normally go into a season with?
Nah, I guess they don't normally go in with that much space. They're not like the Steelers.
They're not the Steelers.
Have that gap, but they typically spend up to the cap. I mean, they got to leave themselves some leeway.
So here's the hypothetical. Now, everybody was talking about Vincent Trocheck. Now you can sign him as your third line center and move Carter over to wing. It's perfect. Works out perfectly if you trade that defenseman and have the cap space for it.
Yeah, and I don't think, people that either follow me on Twitter, watch this show, listen to this show, probably think like I hate Jeff Carter or something like that. I don't think at his age, with the mileage that he has, he's suited to fulfill the duties of being a third line center. The guy still almost scored 20 goals last year, though, and I think could be a serviceable winger, whether that's right or left. Yeah. He played both in LA, and I think he could play either one here. So I still think he has some value to the team. It's just I would rather him play wing than center, and especially now that we're talking about – just thank God we're not talking about as a second-line center at the very least. So
yeah, we don't have to worry about that.
Very excited about this, but they're going to still, I think, be – somewhat active in free agency, but this is just another domino to fall. This was the big domino to fall after getting Kris Letang done last week. But man, if you would have told me that the Pens are going to get out of this free agency period, re-signing Rust, Gino, Letang, and Rakell, no, I would have not seen this coming.
If you would have told me an hour ago when we recorded our first segment, I would have said no. This is not happening.
Well, you know what? Never mind. Release the last segment that we did for the full episode that we just recorded, because I said, and you might have been thinking the same way, but you asked me how I would feel if they didn't get something done like even right at noon. I said, listen, he's going to be a Penguin. I can't believe anything else. So I want everybody to know, never lost faith. Gino was always a Penguin.
I didn't say anything, but I will just be completely transparent. If they got to 12 o'clock, I would just figure he's not going to be a Penguin at that point. I'm happy we didn't get to that point. Where
did you think he would get? Did you have an idea of where he would go if it wasn't going to be here?
Honestly, I have no idea. What about? I don't want him to. Or he's not going to now. I don't have to talk like that anymore, or in that tense anymore. I didn't want him to go to like New York or Washington, even though it had been like thrown around those ideas. But I mean, maybe like Colorado. They lost Nazem Kadri.
Yeah,
so
that's where I was thinking. They were one of the few that were thrown out along with like Dallas, which like what a weird fit that would be. But Colorado, had he not, obviously options A, B, C through pretty much like X were Penguins for me. But when you get down to the bottom, if it had to be somewhere else, not Pittsburgh, Colorado would have been where I preferred him to play. So.
Yeah, the whole Washington thing would have been weird to me because I would have gotten the same kind of vibe from it that I would have like whenever I've thrown around just as a joke, like, oh, Claude Giroux can come to the Penguins. Like, I just feel like those players wouldn't morally let that place happen. Like, they just wouldn't want to go there. Kind of like Fleury this past season, whenever Washington got brought up in a trade. He just didn't want to go there because of his past with the Penguins. Same thing with I feel like Malkin would probably feel the same way with Washington, just like Giroux would have been with the Penguins if that had to come to that case. But now it doesn't. And so Malkin signed. Literally, it's just so I can't get over the fact that it's so fast after we record. Now we're re-recording. The only time we've ever really done this before was actually a different Penguin signing and it was an extension whenever Patrick Hornquist got extended to $5.3 million a year for what was it, 5 years?
I think
something
so.
like that,
because that was so rare for them to do in season, like
right.
And it's just like special cases like this. They give reason to do something that we never really do, which is re-record a segment. But obviously having Gino back in the fold is huge, at least for the short term. We know it's a big deal. But going to the 4 years, that was obviously like a big sticking point, and that's why in the segment that you guys won't ever hear or see, I brought up it was kind of odd if they weren't willing to go to 4 because they went to 6 with Letang, they went to 6 with Rakell. So let's talk about those deals now. 6 years for Kris Letang at 6.1. Oh, there's a 6.1 million. That's a number that should keep coming up in this episode. Does this surprise you at all? I mean, I said if they could get him under 8, I'd be ecstatic. They obviously did that, but it took them going to 6 years. Again, I think that their plan of attack here, though, and I'm not saying like Jesse was wrong in his thinking or anything like that, but they definitely went more along the lines of what I thought they would do and say this is, a 2 to 3 year thing. The back end of these contracts, we're not worrying about them right now.
Yeah, and who knows? Maybe Letang's full 6 years or year 5, he's still playing pretty serviceable. But I would say the contract doesn't really surprise me in terms of the number to the year amount. Now, if you take them each component by itself, then yeah. So 6 years by itself, that seems like a lot for a 35-year-old defenseman. And then 6.1, that seems low for Kris Letang, but there was definitely some give and some take from the front office and Letang. We'll give you the extra years if you come down on the dollar amount. And so the contract as a whole, not as surprising. The individual components of it, for sure. But again, just like Malkin, happy it got done. He was a top priority. It happened literally the day after our episode came out or something like that. In typical fashion, we didn't get to record that segment, but we get to record this one.
Right.
Yeah, and it's just another one of those guys locked up and on these long-term contracts. Like you're saying, the realistic window for this team is probably at most, I mean, I would say at the very most probably 4 years, and realistically probably 2 to 3 years of when they can actually win a Stanley Cup, and they might not ever win one, but the contract doesn't matter to me. And especially at the dollar figure, honestly helps save some cap moving forward every year from what it could have been. So I'm happy about that. I love this contract. 6 years might seem crazy to some people with a 35-year-old defenseman, but he's coming off one of, if not the best year he's ever had. So how are you really going to argue that he just can't keep this up past the 2 to 3 year window we're even talking about?
Yeah, I do want to say this just came out was the breakdown of Gino's new deal, so figured that was relevant to bring up here. $4 million salary and a $4 million signing bonus in year one, $6 million salary in year two, $5.6 million salary in year three. Year four, $1 million salary and a $3.8 million signing bonus.
So to me, that's just like if you want to retire / we buy you out, that it's not going to be a lot of money. I don't expect the Penguins to buy him out in year 4, but if they get to that point, it's not going to hurt the team that much.
Yeah. Yeah, so I wonder, do you think that the structure of this was the exact same, or did them tweaking that, was that maybe what it took to get over the finish line? Or do you think that this was the exact same deal that's been on the table for a week or so?
I doubt it is. How could it be? For all the back and forth that we've heard, and then again, we have no idea what's going to be true or false when it comes to all of the Gino contract talks from all the different sources that we've had. But the 4x6.1 seems to be a steady contract that's been throughout the discussions the past couple of days. And I feel like it could not have been just the status quo contract that was given to him if it was said that he was going to reach free agency and he was going to like explore his options. Something had to have changed in the timetable of them giving him the contract to when he's signing. I don't think he just had a change of heart. Like you said, maybe Sid got in his ear, maybe someone else got in his ear, maybe he just had a change of heart. He is an impulsive person, but I just feel like something had to change, and maybe they did front load that money like they did on the Letang contract, and he was more okay with it at that point.
Yeah. Speaking of Letang, I guess we can keep moving on, though. We did talk about the Letang deal a little bit here. So not necessarily surprised that they went to 6 years because of the money. How about going 6 years with Rickard Rakell? $5 million a year there on that contract. I think that the $5 million relatively expected, I think, with what he showed with Pittsburgh. A little bit of a resurgence, a bounce back, if you will, heading into free agency. The $5 million number doesn't surprise me at all. But when you talk about a 6-year deal for a guy that's eclipsed 30 goals twice in his career, not since 2018, eclipsed 50 points in his career twice, not since 2018, it's a little bit surprising to see a guy like that get that term. But I think, what it circles back to, and we can say this until we're blue in the face, not a great free agent class. And, when you even look at trade targets, there's not a ton of top end talent being floated out there. Like, sure, like a JT Miller, but my friend Doug was texting me today that he was seeing a report. Vancouver said that they've gotten no calls yet about JT Miller. They haven't gotten calls since the trade deadline of last year about JT Miller. That's pretty much.
If you give me their number, I'll call them. It's not going to mean anything, but I'll give them a call.
So it doesn't sound like there's like a ton of top end. There's not top 6 wingers just growing on trees right now. So from that perspective, I understand it. Again, when you looked at the term that the Penguins have been handing out, I understand it. I would have liked to have seen this in the neighborhood more of like a 3 to 4 year deal, completely fine with a number on it. Even though I thought it would be more towards 4 than 5, but here we are. Rickard Rakell, 5 years, $6 million a year. How do you feel? I'm sorry, 6 years, $5 million.
6 years, $5 million a year.
Yeah.
Like I said in the segment that none of you over here except Smitty gets to hear it twice. I can understand the contract in terms of the free agent market. And of course, every free agent is probably going to get overpaid in some way, whether it's going to be the term or the yearly value of the contract. And I don't really think he's being overpaid in the yearly value. Like, I would have estimated that he's probably going to make between $4 to $5 million on a contract with the Penguins or with another team. It doesn't really matter where he was at. The years, though, that's where it was like confusing to me at first. Like, why is it on a 3 to 4 year deal instead of a 6 year deal? But at the end of the day, I mean, we've seen like we mentioned before, like Brandon Tanev, and when I say before, I mean on the segment that nobody's going to hear. Like Brandon Tanev. Brock McGinn getting 4 years as well. I mean, we didn't even bring that one up, but to me, like any bottom 6 winger that is getting like 4+ years, that's kind of shocking to me. But that's kind of just the case of free agency, and I think the Penguins are just kind of jumping the gun a little bit. And maybe we have no idea what the discussions were with his agent. They don't know what calls he was getting about Rickard Rakell. maybe they had just had to give on some of the years to make sure he was back, because this is a guy that's familiar with the Penguins organization because we traded for him. We liked what we saw in the sample size. We wanted to bring him back. And like we've talked about on this episode and on many episodes before, top 6 talent, not just in the NHL, but in the Penguins organization as a whole, is almost non-existent besides the top 6 that they have on their NHL roster. They don't have anybody in Wilkes-Barre that's ready to come up and play in that top 6. They don't have anybody in Wilkes-Barre that's ready to play up in the bottom 6. So, let alone top 6. And then free agents wise, there's nobody of an equal value, I would say, to Rakell that you're probably going to be getting on a lesser contract. And there's really not much in between. There's a kind of high-end ceiling of this free agent class, and there's a large drop-off, I feel like. And so Rickard Rakell's kind of in that middle spot, and I'm fine with the contract. I've kind of just swallowed it. 6 years, it is what it is. But at the end of the day, like we've been talking about, if the realistic window is only like the 2 to 4 years that we're talking about, who even cares if it's 6? That's it's tough because like you shouldn't think like that. But at the end of the day, if we're going to think like that, then it shouldn't really matter. And I will say that his 2 best years did come in the 17 and 18 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, when we traded for him, I don't want to necessarily hold the seasons after that against him, because Anaheim was a bottom 5 team in the league every single year. And I know that shouldn't hinder his production entirely, but I do think there is a big difference between playing on a really good team, like a playoff team, and then playing on a bottom 5 team. And I saw the same thing whenever we signed Danton Heinen last season, and people were like, well, why are we bringing this guy in? He's not that great. I mean, first off, we signed him for like what, $1.5 million or whatever it was. But second, if you look at his numbers from whenever he was in Boston to when he went to Anaheim, it's completely different. So I think that maybe this contract is also not what you have been in recent years, but what we think you're going to be with the Penguins the next few seasons. So maybe it's easier to swallow if you look at it that way. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess you're really banking on what you saw in that sample size. And I mean, they saw it firsthand. They know better than I as to the player that they have in house right now.
Yeah.
Again, it's just kind of, unimaginable to me that they saw enough within that sample size to hand him this contract. And but
well, now they know at least who the center's going to be for him, and it's going to be Malkin. And hopefully, if they're going to stick with that pairing, they can get some more chemistry. They won't have that small sample size. They'll have training camp, then they'll have an 82-game season to work together. I mean, still preferably, I know you and I are on the same page. We still want to up with Sid, but with Malkin coming back, it's probably going to look more and more like it's just going to be Zucker and Rakell to start the season on the second line.
Yeah, Zucker's another guy I'm curious about. Like, is he on the roster next year? Or do they try to do something with him to move out salary? But if he is on the roster,
that contract's so immovable. What team wants to take that?
Yeah, I think it would have to obviously be part of a larger trade where you're looking. Okay, so for example, I don't think it's going to happen, but I don't know if you saw it. DK reported at the draft that the Pens and Canadians were talking about Jeff Petrie trade. So to me, that would have been a name that made sense for sure if Letang wasn't back in the fold. It could also make sense if you were bringing him in to then move Marino in a separate deal. But I think if that were the case, if you're bringing in a Jeff Petrie, Zucker would have made sense as a name going back, because it's still letting Montreal get rid of $1 million this year. And then you also, Petrie has 3 years left on his deal. So the Canadians would have been off the hook for the following 2. Yeah. So I think like a trade like that could potentially make sense where it's like salary for salary, but obviously one team's on the hook for longer. But yeah, I don't think it's like an easily movable trade. I think that he's more valuable, honestly, to the Penguins, because he is one of the few guys that can play in the top 6 and you're just banking on him staying healthy. He is a good player. Like I think that and I think I get it. Minds get kind of clouded because he hasn't been available to the Penguins much, and he hasn't scored at the rate that he did in Minnesota. He's obviously not a player that he's being paid to be, but he's still a very serviceable top 6 player, and I think can definitely play on a second. Here's what I'm getting at here is a second line of Gino, Zucker, and hopefully some more chemistry with Rakell or Rust. I think that's a perfectly fine top 6 And Jason Zucker could actually kind of be like the play driver for that line as well. Because I was talking about how
Yeah.
Rakell definitely needs a play driver on a line that he's going to be on to be able to be like that 25 to 30 goal scorer. There you go. I think a healthy Jason Zucker definitely contributes to that.
And at worst, you're on the last year of his deal. He's not going to be a Penguin next year. So you eat it for one more year.
Yeah, we
and
said
then
the same
it's
thing
gone
though
after that.
about we said the same thing about Bryan Rust. Maybe Jason Zucker comes back, even though we're not expecting it.
Well, I'd be fine with that if they flip the cap hits,
Yeah,
which they
yeah.
kind of did. If Zucker goes down to
Yeah, hey,
that
we're halfway there.
$3.5 million cap hit, then
We're
it's
halfway
fine.
there now.
But
All
yeah,
right, so Rickard Rakell deal, we're okay with. The last deal to talk about here, I think that this is a domino to fall for this defense. We've been talking about moving a left-handed defenseman now for what, like a year and a half, and I think that POJ on a 2-year extension making $825,000 per year. And here's the biggest part of this: on a one-way deal, this is like it's happening. I don't know if it's going to be within the next 24 hours by the time you guys are listening or watching this, but they're moving a left-handed defenseman, and it's not the name that I would prefer them to do so. I don't think it's going to be. I expect it to be Marcus Pettersson. If I had my pick
yeah,
of the litter, it's Brian Dumoulin. I think Brian Dumoulin has this weird thing with him because of winning 2 Stanley Cups, playing on a top pairing defense for the better part of, I mean, it's been over like 6 years now. He's been like a mainstay on that top pairing pretty much. So, I think that his perceived value to another team is probably higher than what like the player that you're actually getting in return just because of what he's accomplished. And I still think that there is trade value there, but he's just diminished as a player, and you hate to see it happen. He's one of my favorite Penguins, like of all time, and it's not even like he's played like he has been here a while now. It's crazy to think how long he's been here, but it's not like he's been like some incredibly long tenured Penguin like Gino or Crosby or Letang or anything like that. But he was one of my favorite Penguins during those cup runs just because he was so underrated. But it's gotten to the point now with really since that ankle injury, he's just not the same guy. And I would rather him be the guy to move out to open up a spot for POJ. But if you're asking what I think is going to happen, the first guy that I look at is Marcus Pettersson because I think that there is trade value there. I think that he's still young. I think it's a more movable contract. He's got the term too. I just think it's a guy that they would rather move than Brian Dumoulin.
yeah. As far as Dumoulin goes, it's not going to happen because one, Kris Letang likes to play with him, and two, I just think that the Penguins, for some reason, and I feel like most GMs feel like this in the NHL, and it's kind of what you were alluding to. The dude's got 2 cups. The dude's been a top line pairing defenseman for a long time. They just they kind of water at the mouth for guys like that, whether the play on the ice or the current play on the ice resembles that resume or not. It doesn't really matter. So realistically, you might be able to get a better return for a guy like Dumoulin just because of his resume than even Marcus Pettersson. Now, what the Penguins are looking for in a return, if they do end up trading the left side defenseman, whether it's just a cap space move or if it's like a hockey trade, I have no idea. But I do think Pettersson would end up being the guy. He's just kind of become a scapegoat to Penguins fans, and I think unfairly most of the time. But I mean, he was a healthy scratch for at different points of this season, so that goes to show like maybe Sullivan doesn't think the highest of them, so that would play into it some more. But I think that it's more so just unfairly the criticisms that he gets because he was pretty solid this season, especially in the playoffs. Him and Marino were the best pairing in the playoffs. And Marino's another guy, like, he's probably the most desired defenseman on the Penguins, but I think that that's the defenseman they least want to move.
If
Especially
POJ were a
because
right-handed shot, I would be saying John Marino in this case, though.
Right. But right-handed shot defenseman, that's hard to come by, especially like a top 4 pairing or like top 2 pairing, I guess it would be. Whatever I'm trying to say. Anyway, I just think that Pettersson is going to be the one. And with this move, like the one-way deal for POJ, and it's been time. We've said before, like, why is he even on this team or in this organization if he's not going to come up? Kind of like Juuso Riikola syndrome, except there was more hype with POJ than there was with Juuso Riikola. If he's not here or if he's not playing, then why is he here? So if you're not going to trade POJ, you need to trade one of the left side defensemen. It's not going to be Mike Matheson. He had a really good this season. Plus that contract, we're talking about Zucker contract. The Mike Matheson contract would probably be even harder to trade, but he did have a really good season, so I don't want to trade him. Dumoulin seems unrealistic, so it's going to be Pettersson. Whether that is at 12 o'clock on the trade deadline day or not trade deadline day, jeez, free agency day, or whether it's closer to the season or somewhere in between, I have no idea. Based off when people are listening to this, I'm hoping that it was before the trade or the free agency, not trade deadline. We're not even in the season. I would hope it's before 12 o'clock on Thursday. Or was
it's gonna be like right after we're done
Thursday.
recording this. So
yeah, it's kind of weird because I have to say I hope it is / was, depending on when you're listening to this episode. But yeah, I just think that would put them in the best case scenario going into free agency, because then at that point, if you come off of a contract like Marcus Pettersson, then according to Cap Friendly, they currently have 4.2 and change, like 4,208,000 in cap space after the Geno signing. So you would have like close to 8 or around 8 million in cap space going into free agency. I think that sets you up really nicely if you want to look for any additional winger, or heck, maybe even a center. Who knows? Maybe the Vincent Trocheck to Pittsburgh thing can get some smoke.
You're really hoping that Jeff Carter ends up playing wing for this team. That's what it sounds
I know
like.
it's unrealistic because for some reason they're just not going to budge, but he shouldn't. He's better at wing at this point in his career. And but realistically, they'll probably look for a middle six winger if they have that much money going into what is / was Thursday, depending on when you listen to this.
Yeah. Also, just kind of like to circle back, the thing with this Geno thing just happening now is more like information and stuff is going to come out while we're recording. So the last thing I want to say about it is Pierre LeBrun just tweeted that the last push for this started around 4 p.m. today. Took about 6 hours before the agreement got done. A day after an emotional Malkin decided to go to market, calmer minds prevailed. Obviously, getting the 4th year plus the full no move clause was important. So, yeah, kind of what I expected. But I think that this goes to show, right, that like what side was telling the truth. That 4th year was on the table a week ago, and don't know why his agent was lying about that. But here we are.
I guess Brian Burke was telling the truth.
There you go, Berkey. Way to be. 4
Learn
years.
how to tie a tie, though.
You got anything else? I think that this was kind of this is wild because we never, like you said, we never do this, but I think it was good. I'm glad that we did, because
but we don't
now
have to, we don't wrap up the show. We move on to the Pirates segment now, even though we recorded it.
Yeah, so we're gonna go. You guys are about to watch us or listen to us talk about the Pirates, who actually, let me check something real quick before we do that. I want to see something.
Of the news we might have missed,
the Dodgers lost. The Pirates have the longest active winning streak in the National League right now, as of recording this, at 4 games.
And we swept the Dodgers a little bit ago. Makes you think.
Yeah, because the Dodgers were at 7, but they lost to the Cardinals tonight, which we don't necessarily love, being NL Central fans, losing to the Cardinals. But the Pirates now have the longest active winning streak in the National League. And tied for the second longest win, or no. There's 2 teams tied for first. There's 2 teams. The Orioles and the Mariners have both won 8 in a row. And the Pirates are next with 4. Those teams, too. The Orioles they're so fun, which I actually bring up in the next segment. So we're about to talk about the Pirates. So everybody stay in your seats. Keep those headphones in. We'll be right back. This is Around the 412 on the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. And welcome back to Around the 412 on the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. We're going to wrap up the show talking about the Pittsburgh Pirates. Some good to talk about. Let's start right there. 4-game win streak, like I said, the longest since September of 2019. Some good things are happening, despite not having Bryan Reynolds. and who knows how long we're not going to have him. Oblique injury, those are very complicated. Honestly, like depending on the severity of this thing, we might not see him again this season. Like that's a legit possibility with how serious oblique injuries are. Between baseball and golf, you literally just cannot do that with an oblique
Yeah.
injury. So hopefully it's on the lesser extent of the injury here. But the Pirates are playing some pretty good baseball. You know, they get guys like Kevin Newman, Jake Marisnick back, and these guys are balling out right now. Now, honestly, like by the end of the month, they're going to be moving some pieces. There's still to be sellers at the deadline, and who knows what this team is going to look like. But like, it's kind of back to that point. I know that they've like made people jump ship with this all year round, going back and forth. But like once again, they've been fun to watch recently. So I'm enjoying watching them. And this series in Miami, not a bad team, by the way. They've taken the first two of the series.
Yeah, it's been good, and it was really shocking to me to hear you say it was a first 4-game win streak since 2019.
Yeah, it's not like a very
Like,
long winning streak. It's just hilarious that
I kind of had to like think about that it was that long ago, because I thought back, okay, the 2020 season that was only 2 months long. They ended up being the worst team in baseball, and then last season, it's strange. Like they didn't win 4 games in a row at any point. That's crazy. But yeah, hopefully the Bryan Reynolds is on the lesser extent of that injury. He's on the 10-day IL now, but it would not surprise me whatsoever if he gets moved to the 60-day IL in like a 2-day span. This is kind of how those injuries work. And so, but besides him, yeah, the Pirates are playing great baseball. They've been fun to watch. And like you said, Marinzik, Newman, just guys that we didn't really have any expectations to do well, come back and are I wouldn't say putting the team on the back, because they're getting production.
Well, Marisnick in this series with Miami has kind of put the team on his back.
That's true. That is true. but yeah, it's been entertaining, and we've seen some more highlight stuff from like O'Neal Cruz, which I mean we talked about like his batting average. Were we worried about it? No. But had a triple tonight. Again, we're recording Tuesday. Had a triple on Tuesday. And homer
Mitch
on
Keller,
Monday.
career long start.
Mitch Keller,
7 innings.
Yeah, I mean that's a guy that we talked about a couple weeks ago. That like this is what we wanted from him. This is what we wanted. If as long as you can be a solid like middle of the rotation guy, give us some quality innings every time you go out. That's great, and he's continued to do so.
He added that sinker, and he looks like a more confident guy. He looks like I think if you lower your expectations, and I'm glad that you just mentioned like being a middle of the rotation guy. I think if you realize, okay, this guy's not a number 1 or a number 2, but he is an MLB starter. He's got to find some consistency, obviously, but like back end of the rotation guys certainly don't have the consistency. I think at the very worst, you're looking at a back end rotation guy. And I know that that's not what we wanted to hear, a couple years ago with what we thought this guy was going to be. But, I think you're looking at a 3, 4, 5 type of pitcher.
You still need those, though.
That's a very talented one. And every once in a while, he's going to go out and throw a gem like he did on Monday night, going 7 innings. So
in a playoff series, you're going to pitch 3 to 4 starting pitchers. So
yeah.
I mean, playoff series. Getting ahead of myself, but still,
couple more years.
The point is still valid.
You know who's been a nice surprise here? Obviously, small sample size, but I think, especially with what we've gotten from the catchers, with not having Roberto Perez, deserves a legit shot, and I think he's getting one. He's made a couple starts in a row. Is Jason Delay, like a guy that we never really thought about, former 4th round pick. He's come up and he's receives the ball very well. He's always been a defensive first catcher, but he's hitting a little bit too. Obviously not a ton of pressure batting where he is in the lineup, always hitting like 8th or 9th in the lineup, but. Yeah. He's given you more than what we've seen, and that's a very low bar. He's given you more than what we've seen from Pirates catching pretty much all year, other than 1 game from Michael Perez. So I'm impressed with him, and I think
doesn't start with a 1, so that's already improved.
I'm giving him like most of the games going forward here at catcher, I would keep him as the backup. Like I would keep him and Heineman as the 1 and 2, going forward.
Yeah, why not? I don't really have much to add on to it.
His batting average doesn't start with a 1. That was all that needed to be said.
That's my whole thing. Batting average does not start with a 1. Also, David Bednar, the All-Star for the Pirates.
How
cool
instead
of getting champagne? Instead of getting champagne, he got a 30 rack of IC Light in Yinzer fashion
and cracked it before their flight to Miami.
I know he was holding one in the team photo.
I don't know if he was like trying to be discreet too, like the way he was standing holding it, but oh man, that is so good. And it's so awesome, for that's his team. He grew up a Pirates fan and to make the All-Star. I can't even imagine. Like imagine one of us, pitching for the Pirates and making an All-Star team to represent them. Their lone All-Star. I think, Bryan Reynolds might have had a legit shot if that April and May weren't as bad as they were, but man, we know that he's one of the best outfielders in not just the National League in but in baseball. So but hey, whatever. The season doesn't necessarily say, if you look at the stat line, that he should be there, and he's hurt anyway, so it really wouldn't matter. But
Right.
let's tie these two names together now, because it also came out that the Pirates have rejected significant trade offers for both of the guys we just mentioned, David Bednar and Bryan Reynolds. Now, Reynolds, we know they're looking for like a king's ransom if they were to deal him. Somebody would literally, we just talked about like overpays when it comes to NHL free agency. The haul that it would take for the Pirates to trade Bryan Reynolds is stupid. And I don't think that anybody's to end up paying it. And I hope nobody does pay it, because I want him to remain a Pirate. With him being injured, that could take this off the table anyways. As far as Bednar, I'm a little bit surprised here that they wouldn't be willing to trade, like basically telling teams he's not going anywhere. I would think that the asking price would be very high, but I would have thought that they would be willing trade partners for somebody if they could match the asking price. It doesn't sound like they're interested in moving him at all.
So, how many years of control does Bednar have left? Like 3 or 4?
Ooh,
before he would get a contract?
Yeah, I actually don't know, because if a guy comes up through the system and we know when he makes their debut for us, like I normally know that to the service time, but being that he was in the majors, at least for a little bit with San Diego before he came here.
So he was in 13 games in 2019 and 4 games in 2020. I don't know how service times works, if like those both count as full years. But if they don't, then I think that the main thing of holding on to Bednar is, if you're wanting to be successful in a year or two, you still want him around. As long as they have the service time to do so. I think as far as service times goes, eventually he'll be gone. But that would be my only like question, as to maybe that's why he's not being listened to on trade talks. But as far as Reynolds goes, I think the Pirates.
Yeah, he's not a free agent until 2027. He's ARB eligible in 2024. So yeah, I mean, he's got.
Yeah, so we got
his service time is listed at only 1.076 years. So
yeah, so we've got a while on him, and I think that's the whole thing, is that the Pirates need to find a balance of trading all your big leaguers away for prospects to okay, when do you kind of slow that down and keep certain guys around for when you're good? You can't trade all of them away. Otherwise, you're just in a constant rebuild. So you have to keep some of them. And guys like that who performed really well, who maybe you want as foundational pieces for when this team is good. I mean, maybe the David Bednar ends up being the Mark Melancon of this team. He ends up being like something like that. And as far as Bryan Reynolds goes, not going anywhere. Unless I'm looking at the top 100 prospects in baseball, I'm like, unless a team like, let's see, the Orioles have a couple top 10 prospects.
The Orioles are really fun, man. Like I think what they're doing this year is like kind of what I expected the Pirates to do this year. Hopefully, it's the Pirates next year.
Yeah, but I mean, maybe Boston has a couple top 15 prospects, but yeah, unless you're getting a king's ransom, you're not going to trade them. But I think that's the whole thing. You have to find the balance of like when you stop trading the MLB players for prospects to whenever you hold on to them, because you're going to want them around whenever you're trying to be good.
Yeah, and I'll let you respond to this, but my last thing with that would be, definitely with Reynolds, agree there. The thing with Bednar, man, is like, and I hope that it's not the case, but like just how hot and cold we can see relievers get just within the course of one season. A reliever on a bad team holds a ton of value to another team, but what's he really helping the Pirates right now? I think like the value that he has to the Pirates is a lot to do with just people emotionally attached to Pittsburgh. Now, I'm not saying trade him right now by any means, but I'm just saying I'm making the case for doing so, because if he falls off of a cliff next year, we're going to be wishing that we traded him this year. And I know that that's like a complete hypothetical. You could say that could happen for anybody, but I'm just pointing it out. With relievers, the likelihood of that happening is much higher than any other position. And to your point, like when you talk about like Melancon and stuff like that, how many of those relievers are already like incumbent for for like 3 seasons by this point when the Pirates are going to be good? Like they typically come into the organization at that point, not already have been here for that long.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get that. I don't know. I just think that they have value, and maybe you do want to trade him for a like a good deal, but I just genuinely think that like
I'm not doing
you're
it
gonna
this
need
year.
a good bull. Yeah, but I also
I
think
think if
like
things
depending
fall
on
apart and next year or the year after something like don't go as we hope that they do, then maybe, but like that's like worst case scenario if that's what we're talking about.
yeah, and best case scenario, you're good within like a year or two, and so
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna need bullpen arms at that point, and I don't think the Pirates are just ready to pull the trigger yet.
Yeah. All right, I think that does it. The last thing that I want to say real quick is just stuff that we're going to be hammering home every single week on here. Follow us on Twitter because we're giving away Steelers tickets when we hit 17,000 followers. And also, as of 11 days ago, as of recording this, 12 by the time you're listening to it or watching it, depending on if you're listening to it the first day. I guess this could be a way down the road, and it's like 3 years if you go back and listen to it. Who knows? But Rock Around the 412 Year 5 has kicked off. And we're raising money. You guys know the mission at this point, but it's going to be our pinned tweet on Twitter. I realized we lied to people last week because the pinned tweet is still the one for 17,000 followers for the tickets.
Oh,
So
oops.
I got to change that. We lied to the people. But every year we do this. This is year 5. We raise as much money as possible. Every single penny that is raised during this mission goes to give kids in our area in the 412 and 724 area codes the Christmas that they deserve. Buy them whatever gifts that they want. Also get the families a $100 gift card to go and get groceries to provide the holiday meal. It means the world to us, and everybody that gets involved with it means the world to us. And it's really something that like we as a community, I think, have really rallied around. There was an article about it in the Beaver County Times last year written by Josh Carney, who we can't thank enough for doing that. Obviously, we raised over $20,000 in the 4 years of doing this. About 11,000 of that was just last year. 30 kids across 13 families had their Christmas in its entirety provided to them. There's pictures all over our Twitter. I put up videos as well, all that good stuff. You guys can find all that information. It will be, I promise, our pinned tweet on Twitter when you go and look at it. So follow us at Around the 412. You'll see it. The link to the GoFundMe to donate is right there as well.
And if you're a boomer and don't have Twitter, then you can just go to GoFundMe.com directly and search Rockin' Around the 412.
I've realized that. I always go back to Twitter and it's like, oh, not everybody has Twitter. That's crazy because it's unfathomable to me. But that's true. Search Around the 412 on GoFundMe and you will find it there. Tyler informed me last week you don't have to adjust it to say Beaver County or anything. It will still show up. Also for Pirate fans, this is going to be weird to try to explain, but I think we're going to have Mike Burrows on next week. Not 100% sure. His agency is the same one as Phillip Evans, who was on here, obviously, when he was with the Pirates. Randomly emailed me and was like, hey, Mike Burrows is our client as well. He's going to be pitching in the Futures game. Would you want to have him on the show to talk about it? Yeah. Like, why would I say no to this? One of the biggest rising stars in the Pirates system. So he's going to be on the show hopefully next week, right after the Futures game. We're going to talk about that experience for him. Big fan of his. He's inked up, man. I hope he shows us all his tattoos and we can compare. I don't have the full sleeve like him, but no, excited to talk to him. If you guys watch, he was on the Pirates broadcast for one of the games this year as well, talking to them when he got called up to AAA. So, but Mike Burrows is going to be on in the very near future. Hopefully it's next week. Other than that, Tyler, do you have anything else?
Nope. Next week when we're talking, I hope we can talk about how Gino is a Penguin. That's the only thing.
Yeah. And we're going to have to inform, Mike came in a little bit later. I don't know if he knows about the Trust the Buck and Process movement, but it's been a while since we had a Pirates prospect on, so we're throwing it back next week.
Nice.
But for everybody else, be sure to like, subscribe, leave us a comment. If you guys, by the way, we got our own channel at Around the 412. Search it on whatever platform that you listen, obviously YouTube, watch. Leave us a like, subscribe, leave us a 5-star review if you can, all that good stuff. I don't need to say any more about it, but do that. Search Around the 412. Until next week, we'll see you guys then. Make Gino a Penguin for life. Talk to you next week. Bye-bye.